Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me here. And it's my great pleasure to talk a little bit about my book. What I'm going to do, I wrote a book I published it in 2018, and it was called The Shopping Revolution. And the reason I wrote that book I wrote it in 2017, but I published it in 2018. And the reason I wrote that book was because in the United States, the year 2017 was called the year of the retail apocalypse in the United States. So the data I'm going to discuss now are US data, but this phenomena happened around the world. And so in 2017, I had been running a retail center at the Wharton School for many years, and I had been watching what had happened in the retail industry. Even though I'm an academic, I was interacting with retailers a lot during the past 6 or 7 years. And so I kind of knew what was happening in retail. And what we were seeing was the year 2017 in the US was called the year of the retail apocalypse because more than 8,600 stores closed in the US that year. It was considered the worst year on record. And people were saying it was the death of physical retail. And my feeling was, it's not the death of physical retail. I had been watching retail for a long time. That's crazy. It's not the death of physical retail. What it's the death of is bad retail. And so what I wanted to do with this book, which I called The Shopping Revolution, was to talk about how the winning people were winning customers in an era of endless disruption. That's the subtitle of the book. And that's what I wanted to focus on. I didn't want to focus on the people who were going out of business. A lot of stores were closing. A lot of retailers were going bankrupt. I wanted to focus on the ones who weren't going out of business, who were doing really well. And so I put together this book, the first version of the book, which is called The Shopping Revolution, published in 2018. And I'm going to present to you the framework I had there. I put together a pretty simplified framework for how the winning retailers were winning. And that's what I kind of want to show you. And if we ever get to me being able to share my screen, I'd like to show you the framework, but if not, I'll try to describe it. But at any rate, published the book in 2018. And I go around the world presenting this framework. Now, the data and my thoughts were built on the US retail market. And as you know, retail is pretty local, but the ideas were pretty generalizable. And so I went around the world to talk about this framework. I went to a lot of retail conferences. I went to Europe. I went to Australia. I didn't go to Latin America, but I went to Miami, and a lot of Latin Americans came to Miami. And so I presented it in Latin and Mexico in Latin American markets as well. And in November 2019, I went to China, and China was very far ahead of the US actually in retail. So that was a very interesting trip. And the more I traveled around all of these different worlds, Asia, Australia, Europe, Latin America, North America, even though this was localized business, the framework that I presented generalized. It's pretty simple. You'll see it's pretty simple, and the ideas generalized. So I felt pretty good about this framework. And not only did it generalize, but people in other industries, not just retail, said, you know what, this model makes sense for us as well. So I was feeling really good November 2019 when I got back from China. And then, as you all know, COVID hit in 2020. And what was interesting was we called the year, this is again, US data, we called 2017 the year of the retail apocalypse because 8,600 stores closed. In March, April, and May, again, just US numbers, in 2020, 250,000 stores closed. Non-essential retail was closed, and we only saw essential retail. So those numbers, 8,600, seem like nothing. And at the end of the year, 2020, an additional 12,000 stores closed. So it was kind of premature to call the year 2017 the year of the retail apocalypse, when in fact, after COVID, retail went through a death spiral, kind of. More and more businesses went out of business. More and more retailers went out of business. Now, what was interesting about that, from my point of view, was that the book that I published in 2018, which said, these are the winners and these are the losers, all the winners were the ones who did very well during COVID. If you might remember, during COVID, people were talking about it as a K-shaped recovery. There were people who were doing very, very well and people who were doing badly. And in my book, which I published before COVID, where I identified the winners, those were the ones who did really well during COVID. And the ones that I was saying were going out of business, they're the ones who went even more bankrupt during COVID. So this was pretty interesting. This meant that the framework that I put together, and I was building that framework on successful retailers, that framework held even through a pandemic. And the people who knew what was going on had already kind of figured it out even before COVID. So I republished my book. I published it again in 2021. It was an updated version. And that updated version has the exact same framework I had before, but it now has some COVID examples and things like that to make the point again about how this model works through COVID. And I also included in my newest version of the book a whole chapter on China, because as I mentioned, I had gone in November 2019 and I learned a lot about retail from China. It was very interesting. So that's in this new book too. So, but basically both versions of the book focus on this one framework that I was talking about. And by the way, the Portuguese translated version is the first version, but the framework hasn't changed from version to version. The only thing that's different is they're more modern, updated examples. And I have this extra chapter on China in the newer version, but the framework is the same. So let me go back and tell you my intuition about how I developed this framework, so you can understand the framework and where it's coming from. My goal in 2017, when I was working on this book to identify the winners during what they called the retail apocalypse, which was, as I said, pretty ironic because COVID was really much more of an apocalypse than 2017 was. But what was happening in the United States in that year was a lot of department stores were closing. So Macy's, the US department store, was closing a lot of stores. JCPenney's was closing. Sears were closing. These are all US or American department stores. Now, when the department stores closed, that was pretty devastating for the malls because they were anchors or draws into the mall. And when they went dark, a lot of the retailers that were in the malls started going out of business too, which is why there were so many closures. So it was a lot to do with the closing of these department stores. Other big categories went out of business too, like Toys R Us closed, Circuit City, Radio Shack. A lot of other retailers were closing, and that was what was precipitating that 8,600 closings in the year of the retail apocalypse. So what I was trying to do is say, well, what can I generalize from these closings? So if I look at the closings of these department stores, the question I asked myself, and I had data, I could look at this, was why aren't people shopping in these stores anymore? Are they not shopping in the stores because they don't want to buy what the store is selling? Or are they not shopping in the stores because they don't like that store and they're going to other stores? And what I found was, oh, people are still buying that product. They're just not buying it from Macy's, JCPenney, and Sears anymore. They're shopping somewhere else. So the question was, where are they shopping? The first thing, and again, I'm looking at the data over the years, so I knew where they were going. The first thing was people were not shopping in department stores, but they were instead shopping in Walmart, TJ Maxx, Target. So they were going to off-price retailers or mass merchandisers. It's not surprising, except the department stores weren't paying attention to this. People perceived the product as somewhat similar, but they thought the prices at these other retailers was much lower. And so why would you buy the same product at a full price when you could buy it at a much cheaper price? So that intuition, it's not shocking, but still it was surprising enough that the department stores didn't see it. Price matters. If your product becomes equivalent to a commodity, then selling at a lower price is going to be a compelling deal. Okay, I'm sure everybody buys that. That's not so surprising, but it was interesting to see that. The second thing was department stores sell a lot of beauty. They're a very important category for department stores because they're frequently on the ground level. People buy beauty products much more frequently than they buy other categories that department stores sell. It's also a fun category and it draws people into the store. If department stores are starting to lose customers who are buying cosmetics, that's not good for a department store because that's drawing people into the store. So where are these people going? And this is, again, pre-2017. The landscape has changed a little bit since then, but I'm going to talk about what happened in 2017 because this was very insightful to me. People were moving from Macy's, which is from the department store, and they were buying their cosmetics and beauty products in Sephora. Now, Sephora is owned by LVMH, and so it's a very sophisticated retailer. And the question was, why were people buying in Sephora instead of in Macy's? Interestingly, at the time, the product was the same. It was not different product. The other thing that was interesting was the price was the same. So remember, in these off-price retailers, they weren't buying from department stores because it was a lower price. Fine. In Sephora, the price wasn't cheaper. It wasn't about different product and it wasn't about different price. So what was different? And what was different was the customer experience. Department stores had a very aggressive push product out strategy. The salespeople are on commission. They're aggressive. They're constantly upselling and cross-selling you. If you want to put makeup on your face, you have to talk to a salesperson because all the makeup is behind the counter, and that person has to go behind the counter, get the materials for you, help put it on your face, and now you're engaged in a one-to-one conversation with a very aggressive salesperson who is pushing product on you. In Sephora, the product's out. You can try it. You can do whatever you want. You can go into that store, put makeup on for a date and leave without anybody saying anything. The salespeople were not on commission. They were not pushing you to buy. This made for a much more positive customer experience. And when the product and price are exactly the same, where would you rather go? You would rather go to a retailer where you enjoy being there. And that's what happened. All of these people left the department stores and started buying cosmetics in Sephora. Now, the other thing about Sephora that made it very interesting was they had a very robust e-commerce loyalty program. And so they had, not only did they know what people were buying in the store, but they were observing their customers' search patterns, what videos they were watching, all of this else on their YouTube channels and online. And they could make sure the brands and the experiences they had in the physical store matched what customers wanted because they linked together their loyalty program with their physical stores. This was quite different from the way Macy's sold. So that was my second big insight. And the third thing, and this is what a lot of people were talking about, was this idea that people were buying on Amazon in e-commerce. So why are people not buying in department stores, which are now closing? Because somebody else is selling it at the same product at a better price. Other retailers are selling the same product at the same price, but with a better customer experience. And e-commerce channel is now really growing. So that was my first insight. And I want to summarize all of those different ideas in my matrix. The other thing I was looking at is what was happening to CPG pre-COVID. Big consumer packaged goods were losing market share, like Gillette, for example, in particular. They lost like 10% market share. And who did they lose market share to? I don't know if you've heard of these companies, but Harry's Shave and Dollar Shave Company. They're both digitally native vertical brands that were selling direct to the end user. And they were stealing market share from very big brands like Gillette and Schick. What was different about their model? First thing was they went direct. So they had access to the customer data, where most of these CPG firms that go through the wholesale channel do not have their customer data. So first thing is they had the data. The second thing was they went direct, so they could get rid of the intermediary margins. So they weren't paying their wholesalers a margin, and therefore they could sell the product cheaper. So they offered a better product because they had customer data. They knew what the customer wanted at a cheaper price. That's a compelling thing. And the other thing these digitally native vertical brands did in this category is they started a subscription service, and they capitalized on lifetime value of the customer. This totally makes sense, particularly in razor blades. It's kind of amazing, was never done before, because you need blades pretty regularly. You don't really, it's not a high involvement category. You just kind of want to reorder. It's a perfect category for a subscription. And that way, when you're bringing new customers in, you don't just get the first time transaction, you sign them up for a subscription, and you get their transactions over time very, very cheaply. This was a very compelling marketing strategy. And a lot of these digitally native vertical brands were attacking legacy brands with this kind of thinking. Okay, so those are the anecdotes that I'm looking at that I want to try to generalize with my matrix. Now, before I describe my matrix, let me talk about one other thing that happened post-COVID, just to bring it up to the modern time. So all the trends that I noticed in my first book by really sophisticated retailers who were taking advantage of these trends, they're accelerated during COVID. And by 2021, McKinsey published a report on what are the long-term trends that we're seeing coming out of COVID. What are the things that we want to look at? And I wanted to make sure that these trends that they're pointing out were still consistent with my matrix, to make sure that my matrix, which was developed before COVID, still held after COVID. And they identified a number of trends, but let me talk about a few that I think are very important. And this was in retail in particular, but it was true for across a lot of other industries also. One is something that developed in retail that continues, developed in COVID that continues post-COVID, is this idea of buy online, pick up curbside. That is a very important thing because that suggests omni-channel. In order to be able to have people buy online and pick up curbside, you've got to have your chat. Oh, I can see it's now. I'm going to share because I can share. And this is just in time because I can show you my matrix. So, all right. So here are the pre-COVID. Now I can talk more quickly because I can have you read some of it also. These are the pre-COVID, post-COVID trends that I'm talking about. I was talking about buy online, pick up curbside. That is a very important trend because that says that the retail is omni-channel. You have your online and your physical seamlessly integrated so that you can have people do something online and pick up in the store. The other thing that McKinsey said was important is the digital shift was sticky. And so people had gotten used to buying online, and now e-commerce was here to stay. I'm not as interested in this one, sustainability and social movements. I'll talk about that another time. But this idea of moving to customer-centered data, personalization in an omni-channel world, very, very important post-COVID. So, and also work from home, important trend, but we'll talk about that another time too. Let me focus on what we're saying. What was really key post-COVID, which made my framework still hold, is this move to customer-centered omni-channel retailing. That means it's important to be focusing on the customer. You need the customer data, and you want your channels, both online and physical store, to be seamlessly integrated. It's not one or the other. It's retail is now omni-channel. It's also important post-COVID to have a relationship with the customer that inspires trust. This actually was what was very importantly new in my new matrix, and it was even more important during COVID. Bottom line, the most important idea here post-COVID is that traditional and digital companies are converging to be everywhere customers want them to be, omni-channel retailing. That is what the definition of retailing is, and this holds for many industries, not just retail post-COVID. This is the biggest trend. Okay, let me move on now to the matrix, and then I'll introduce the matrix, show you the strategy, and then we'll open it up for questions. So remember where I started. Macy's is not, department stores are closing. Where are they going? And why are they going there? That's the question I'm trying to answer. And I'm going to write a new book with this answer. Now, it's a retail book. I've been a marketing professor forever, so I have a lot of retail books in my office. And I'm thinking to myself, why do I need to write another book? There's tons of books out there. What do I need another one for? I don't. But I look at all of those retail books and I see something's missing. All of these definitions of retail and a lot of traditional businesses outside of retail are focusing on product and operations. To be a good retailer, people say you have to be a good merchant. You have to learn how to assort. You have to learn what's good product. You have to put together product that people want. They focus on what makes for a good assortment, what makes for a good product. The other thing these retail books were focusing on is logistics. How do you deliver the product to the end user? Okay, so with operations and product, what's missing from this matrix? What's missing from the matrix, which is very important, and we saw that in the Sephora example, is the customer. So my matrix is different from these other retail matrices because I focus on what the customer wants. Now, what does the customer want in retail? Very, very simple idea that's going to translate to other industries. All they want to do is buy something they value from someone they trust. What does that mean? Something they value means the right product at the right price. That's not new. What is new is this idea that they care about who they're buying from. They care about the customer experience, which is independent from the product and price. That was true before COVID, and it became even more important after COVID. The other thing that wasn't in these books is the competition. People thought they were too big to fail, like Gillette or some of these other really big companies. They are now being disrupted by these brand new companies that are coming out of nowhere, like Shein. These companies are coming out of nowhere. So the point is, if you don't give the customers what they want better than the competition, your customers will leave you. If you have to continually monitor the competition, and you have to provide customer value better than the competition is doing it. These are not revolutionary ideas, but these two ideas were not in any of my retail books. And that's why I came up with the new matrix. Okay, here's the matrix. I call it a success matrix because what's happening here, when I'm looking in 2017 to identify who's winning and who's losing, I could categorize every one of the successful retailers in this matrix. That was my goal, to make the simplest matrix possible that captures all the successful retailers. And I build it on the two principles I just showed you. The principle of customer value, give the customers what they want and do it better than the competition. Okay, so the columns of my matrix is give the customers what they want. What do they want? Product, but also they want to buy from someone they trust. The customer experience matters. Now, the rows are going to be do it better than the competition. How do you do it better at a very basic, simple level? You either, in retail, you increase pleasure. This matrix has been used for healthcare, it's been used for other things that are not necessarily fun categories. So it's increased trust, increased hope, increased comfort, but make it more better, okay? So increase the positives, or you take away the pain. That gives me a 2x2 matrix. And in this 2x2 matrix, I could categorize all of the winners pre-COVID. And when I went back to update the book, same. The winners were the same, and they all fit in this matrix. So who were winning? Remember, we go back to that story I told you about Macy's. Macy's is not going to be on, the department store is not going to be on this matrix. It's just, I'm just going to put the winners. Who were the winners? Well, if you have a great brand or a great product, those companies were still winning. Luxury did very well, and they're still doing really well. Nike did well. Zara does well with product assortment. Warby Parker is a digitally native vertical brand. They were doing well during this time. Luxury is interesting. Who's the richest man in the world? Bezos got divorced. He divided up his wealth. Elon Musk has bought Twitter, and it's crazy. So the third wealthiest man in the world is Bernard Arnault, who's the CEO of LVMH. He's the wealthiest man in the world now, and his wealth is based on the value of brand. If you have the best product or the best brands, that is still a winning strategy. But it's not the only way to win. You can also win, as we've talked before, on price. So if people don't think your product is enough better, and it's almost as good as everybody else's, they're going to start buying on price. For price to win, you've got to have the right cost model, because if you're giving 30 to 60% discounts, if you want to be profitable, you're going to have to figure out creatively how to do your costs. And all of these retailers have very different cost models. And it's very interesting to think strategically about how you can lower price through doing some innovation in cost. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but that's a very interesting thing to think about. But that's not the only way to win. You can also win on customer experience. So if you sell the same product at the same price, but you offer a better experience, that's the Sephora story. They were customer focused. They got their data. They knew what the customers wanted. They built on long-term value of the customer, and they could compete head to head with good brands because they were offering better customer experience. And the big story that a lot of people were talking about is another way to win was to take away all the pain from the customer experience and make it as easy and as frictionless as possible. And the way to do that is to collect the customer data so that you can remove all the pain at all the pain points. And nobody did that better than Amazon. And in the US during COVID, Amazon had like over 90% of the marketplace, and their retention rates were very, very high. People were buying on Amazon, not because they thought they get the best product, not necessarily even because they thought they were getting the best price, because Amazon is not the lowest price retailer. It was just easy, and easy was good enough to buy from them. So this matrix now took over everybody, all the winners that were doing really well before COVID and after COVID, all of these people still doing really well. This matrix summarized it. Now, how do I use this matrix strategically? And why? How does it apply to any industry? Basically, I think of these 4 boxes in the abstract: best product, lowest price, best customer experience. We'll talk about what that means, or take away the pain in the customer experience. If you think about this as a grid, you put the origin at the center. and you think about each one of these as kind of a track record, and you can start measuring data to measure where you are and where the competition is on each of these boxes. If you don't want to be part of an apocalypse, the first thing you have to do is be good enough. So you figure out what are table stakes, what are good enough in each of these boxes, and you make sure you're good enough in each one of these boxes. Now, what's tricky about this is in a very competitive world, what's good enough is constantly being ratcheted up. So it's a moving target. But still, in order to not go out of business in retail, and as it turns out, in most industries, you've got to be good enough at product, good enough at price, and good enough at customer experience. What was interesting to me was the winners, the ones that were really winning, which are the ones I focused on in both of my books. They were not just the best at one of these, because you want to be the winner. To just not be part of the apocalypse, you just have to not get killed. So you just have to be good enough at all four. But if you want to win, you got to be the best at one of these boxes. That is what I categorized all the successful retailers at. Who's the best in each one of these boxes? That's a map I just showed you. But when I looked deeper, what I found was the winners were the best, not just in one quadrant, they were the best in two. So Amazon is the best at frictionless, but they also compete on low price. If you want to buy easy and you want to buy cheap, you go to Amazon. They're good enough in the other two boxes, but they're the best at those two boxes. Walmart competes head-to-head with Amazon in the US and worldwide too, with a very, very different model. They are the best at low price because they have the best operationally excellent model. Their costs are the lowest at transaction. But they have now become frictionless also. They make it very easy to buy from Walmart in a very different way than Amazon does. They're good enough at brand and experiential, but they're the best at frictionless. The vertical brands or direct, they were the best at brand, but they also, because they went direct and they got rid of the intermediary margins, they could offer a lower price. And because they go direct, they collect data and they can take away the customer pain points. Costco is a low price retailer, but part of the reason people go there is they love the experience. Luxury brand is important, but it turns out customer experience is also very, very important. And Sephora, I mentioned, had a very good loyalty program, and they leveraged that loyalty data to be the best at their in-store experience. So the winners are the best at one quadrant. They leverage that to be the best at a second quadrant, and they're good enough at the other two. Now, before I finish, I know I'm out of time, but I'm not going to tell you about this Amazon store. I just want to quickly go to something else. That I could show you how the matrix works with Amazon or how it works with Walmart. But let me just show you one interesting thing. If you're a brand, you're going to be the best at brand. You're probably, especially if you're luxury, but any kind of premium brand, you're probably not going to want your second quadrant to be price. So what you're seeing brands do nowadays is to pick a second quadrant that's some kind of experience that they wrap around their brand. So they continue to make their brand better, but now a lot of the focus post-COVID is on this idea of customer experience. And what my matrix is showing, and I got this from China also, this is the point I want to make, what I learned from China. China was really focusing on customer experience. My argument is that reason Amazon won was not because of product or price, but because they came up with the best frictionless experience. In China, they understand the importance of this, and the way they characterize this dimension is about time. If you look at my product dimension, this is old marketing. You either do premium products at the price tends to be higher, or else you compete on a lower price and the product's not quite as good. That's kind of a value or product value dimension. On the experience part, it's a time dimension. And what you're doing in customer experience is you're either providing an opportunity for your customer to kill time with you, which is what Alibaba does in China. The people spend a lot of time with Alibaba online. It's like 20 minutes that you go into Alibaba and you spend time engaging, you build customer engagement. That's a kill time strategy. Or Amazon makes it as easy as possible to save time. So if you think of this dimension as a value dimension, this is a time dimension. And you've got to pick whether you want people to engage with you, so you create a stronger relationship, and then you're going to sell on that customer engagement, or you create a frictionless, convenient thing, and you make it as easy as possible, so you save your customers time. And that's basically what my matrix is talking about. Be good enough at everything, come up with one leadership quadrant, and then pick a second quadrant to be the best at. You need 2 quadrants to win. So I know I took a little bit too much time, but it was a little bit harder to start off with without pictures, but hopefully this makes sense.
Yeah, it really makes sense, Barbara. And thank you. Thank you for presenting the main ideas of your book. And well, we can't talk about the success in retail without talking more about Amazon, because Amazon, is the gorilla in the room, and not only US, but also in Brazil. And how do you think the traditional retails or the regular retails can compete with Amazon?
One of the things I learned from my first book is antitrust, because Amazon had such a huge advantage. Now it's starting to be mitigating. They're not quite as strong as they were when I wrote the first book, but Amazon has an incredible advantage, because what Amazon's doing, if I go back to my Amazon, I can show you the Amazon model here. What Amazon was doing, basically, remember what I said is, you've got to be the best at all 4. I mean, good enough at all 4. What Amazon did was increase the value of frictionless. They made, and this really took off during COVID. They made the fact that they were easy to buy an incredible advantage. People didn't used to think about that. Pre-COVID, if you had something took a couple weeks to get delivered, that was fine. If you had to go to the store to pick it up yourself, that was fine. What Amazon did was say, we're going to make it as easy as possible, and everybody else has to catch up to them on frictionless. They're the best on frictionless, and they constantly make it harder and harder to catch up with them. And so they're making everybody chase after them on frictionless. Then they can offer the best price because they don't compete on margin. They make their money from AWS. They make their money, 60% of operating margin in Amazon comes from AWS. They are now making money on digital advertising. They don't make their money on transaction. When you don't make your money on the margin, you can always lower your price, which is what they do, because they make their money elsewhere. So it is very, very hard to compete against them because they're the easiest and the cheapest. However, Walmart is competing against them because they defined easy a different way. And they are operationalizing their costs differently. You have to compete in these 2 boxes if you want to compete head to head, or you can compete up here. Amazon does not have the best brands. They do not have the best store experiences. They do not have good experience. In Amazon, it's about getting out really fast. If you want to build a relationship, you can do that. Luxury does not sell on Amazon. If you want to buy luxury products, you're going to buy them off of Amazon. And so you can compete by not going head to head, by competing up here, or you can compete down here, but that's a little bit harder to compete on price or on easy because they're very dominant on price and easy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really makes sense. And I think, being frictionless is sometimes what you're looking for. You gave an example in one of your interviews, putting the milk in the back of the store just to make you go walk through the entire store. Yesterday, I went to a traditional mall for lunch, and you know how they put the escalators. The escalators going up is in one place, and in the opposite side is the escalator to get down, just to force you to walk through the entire floor. So I think most of the time you are really trying to make to buy, you know, with the less friction you have. I also gave you the example of one website here in Brazil where you have to provide your email, your password, go through facial recognition, and then using a token from Google Authenticator. So I think Amazon is really, really great, you know, when you talk about being frictionless.
And that was Bezos' genius that I think when I give talks about Amazon, it's my belief that Jeff Bezos doesn't like to shop. I love to shop. So the idea of spending time in a store is very pleasant to me, and spending time on a website, that's fun. I think of it as a hobby. He clearly doesn't. And he wants to make it as easy as possible. For sure, he would not put the milk in the back of the store. He'd put it up front. And his genius was inventing one-click shopping, because one-click shopping, which he invented in 1997 and patented and nobody could copy for 20 years, was the idea that I'm going to get you off your website instantly. That is not the way traditional retailers or merchants think. They think exactly as you're saying with the escalator or the milk in the back. I want to keep you in the store as long as possible, because the longer I keep you there, the more you're going to buy. That is a strategy, and that does make sense, but you have to think about it in a positive way, from a customer-focused way. If you make that customer experience positive, like Sephora did, they will spend time in the store. But if you're doing it just to trick them into buying more, it won't work anymore, because other people are making it easier to get out. And if your time matters to you and you don't want to spend time shopping, you're going to go to the one that's much easier. So that is a really big question. Does your customer want to kill time and engage with you, or does your customer want to save time and just get the transaction over with? And you can differentiate depending upon where you are on this dimension. Amazon is quite clear. They're going to make it as easy as possible for you. And everything they do tries to take the friction out of the experience. But there is an opportunity to build engagement, because they don't do that.
Well, yeah, and I think another point is in terms of the physical stores, because Amazon just started, you know, with e-commerce online, and now they are opening stores in US. Uh, do do you think physical stores is going away, or what is the role of the physical store in this new retail?
You know, it's so interesting. I just saw recent data about groceries. So during COVID, when people were afraid to go into physical stores, everybody learned how to shop online. You know, people who were afraid to shop online learned how to shop online. And so everybody understood how to shop online, and people were predicting digital stores, e-commerce was going to rise post-COVID 25 to 40%. Those were the predictions. And I just saw numbers about grocery in the US. I don't know what it's like in Latin America, but in grocery, over 90% of the shopping in grocery in the US is being done in the physical store. People are going back to the physical store. Now, it's not the exact same behavior as it had been before. There are some things that people are buying online, but they are not abandoning physical stores. Physical stores are changing. The digital brands that open digital, they're all opening stores now. You're seeing that physical stores are 100% not going away. People like physical stores, but they're morphing, they're changing. There's some things that are going to be sold online and people prefer to shop for online. And there's other things that people want to maximize in a physical store.
Oh, yeah, but and I think one very important point in this case is having what you call as a customer-centric omnichannel, because if you have physical stores and an e-commerce, you really need to provide a seamless experience to customers. And I was listening one of your interviews. You were just talking about how you talk to your daughter. You can use a phone, or you can talk directly to her or WhatsApp. It doesn't matter the channel. You always have the conversation with her, and I think that's the main point: a seamless experience, no matter the channel you're using.
Yeah, it's really uncanny when I think about that. I can't remember the mode that I know what the content was about, but I can't remember if we texted or we said it on phone or we said it in person. And that's the way people think about shopping. They absolutely, and that's difficult because a lot of legacy retailers, they don't have it matched. In fact, even the buy online, pick up in the store, that's pretty, even for a sophisticated retailer like Walmart, it's very hard. Because what they were telling me is when you go online, even if it's matched and they know what's in inventory when you purchase it in the beginning, if you purchase your product in the morning and you don't pick it up until the afternoon, by the time you go to pick it up, it might be stocked out in the physical store. And so you've got to have algorithms and sophisticated software that can make substitutions if you don't have the stockouts. I mentioned in my retail books, it was all about product and logistics. Those problems don't go away. The logistical problems of stocking inventory and logistics for delivering product to the end user, those are still here, even though the front office has changed. And figuring out how to maximize and how to make your algorithm smart enough to make smart substitutions or anticipate stockouts, et cetera, it's still very, very, very complicated. So a lot of retailers who understand the idea of omni-channels, they don't have the sophistication yet to do it. Because it sounds easy to say, it's kind of hard to operationalize.
Oh yeah, and sometimes here you even have different prices in e-commerce and also in physical stores. So I think you really need to have a seamless experiences, because sometimes I don't understand why it costs different if I'm the physical store and not buying online.
Yeah, now that the people who've been in omni-channel for a while, they won't have those different prices anymore. That used to happen, but now they are trying to synthesize that. But what I saw in China, and this is pre-COVID, was the inventory was so synchronous, made so much simultaneous between what's online and what's in the store, is that they automatically delivered things to these little small convenience stores, and they dynamically changed price as a function of demand and supply. So they knew when the supply was going down, because they had everything integrated, and they could increase the price when that happened. And they were dynamically pricing based on a very sophisticated inventory approach. And the product was being kind of automatically delivered to the stores when they were running out of inventory. It was so connected. It was really amazing kind of thing. You don't see that in the United States yet. And this was before COVID that they were already doing that. It was very, very interesting how sophisticated their retail models were.
No. And I think there is one point you mentioned about your presentation. It's about data. How important is data, customer data, in to succeed in retail?
I mean, to me, the success, it depends on the level of competition in your market. If you don't have very sophisticated competitors, you can just push out the product. They can't get it anywhere else. As the competition gets more and more intense, and in a global marketplace, you are seeing it get intense. I mean, like, for example, in the US, the Chinese retailers are coming into the US. Shein is coming in, Temu is coming in, and they're massively accumulating market share. When that starts to happen, the secret sauce is going to be that customer data.
Yeah. Well, how do you see the future of retail? We are just telling that the physical store will be here, and also e-commerce. How do you see the future of retail?
If I go back to this model that I showed you here, we'll either see innovative new brands. So we'll see maybe new fashions, new technology, Apple's constantly coming out with something fancy that we want to buy. So people, as we get better and better products, people will continue to buy better products. You will see interesting people figure out how to make them cheaper. That's your typical way an industry goes. But what's really new is this column here on how you build the customer experience. And the idea of save time, kill time, which is the idea that I picked up from China. I had it in my matrix, but I didn't call it that. But this idea of kill time, how do you build a customer experience that is engaging, that customers want to spend time with you? It's kind of like when you think about your own personal relationships, who are your best friends that you are loyal to? They're the people you spend the most time with and you enjoy spending time with. That is going to be the future of some retailers, where they provide a customer experience that you like to be part of. The other one, and you can use technology to do that. We're starting to see metaverse, augmented reality, virtual reality, 24/7 immersive technology. When you look about Generation Alpha, you're going to see these people are gamers and they spend time in Roblox and all that other stuff. Nike's already building virtual worlds. So it doesn't have to be physical engagement. It can be, but it can also be this 24/7 immersive environment, gaming platforms like Roblox, Decentraland, Sandbox, all of those that people are really playing with. That's up here. Or we're going to use technology to make it as easy as possible to shop. And if you make it really easy for me and you take away all the pain, then I'm going to be loyal to you. I think the future of retail is really here. This is what's new. Figuring out how either to save time and make it easier for the customer, or kill time and build engagement with the customer. And a lot of that is through data and technology.
Oh, great. A lot of things to think about. And it was very, very insightful. And thank you very much to present your book. And
Sure.
it was a pleasure having you here.
Yeah, thank you. It was my pleasure too. Somebody wants to, send me questions in the email and stuff, I'm happy to answer them. So thank you very much for the time and for the platform to speak about my book and what I've been doing. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And well, everyone can learn more about the ideas of Barbara. Just, write a phrase about the event in the event page on LinkedIn. And the 10 best phrases, you're going to receive a free copy of her book. And you can choose if you'd like the Portuguese version or the English version.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. Have a nice day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.